If that hasn't gotten people to wake up yet, what will? Wake up and realize these people don't care about you. The Libertarian Party is the only party that actually cares about your rights to liberty and freedom. What's up, North Carolina? I'm your host, Mike Ross, and welcome to the Liberty Inc. podcast, your source to all things liberty in NC. And today we actually have a Libertarian candidate for Kernersville Board of Aldermen, Mr. John Stafford Stanley. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. So to everybody listening, I met John at the LPNC convention. We had a good chat, and he was talking about running for office. I don't think it was official there at the time, but I've been watching, and it just went official, and we'll talk about it. So if anybody's here for the beginning, I don't want to miss the plug. So johnstaffordstanley.com. If you get nothing else, go check out the site there to read a little bit more about it. But John, I thought, you're running for local office. I'm a big fan of local libertarian governance. I think that's where we can really make the most impact. So I'm excited to have you on as a candidate, and talk about your campaign, talk about your vision for Kernersville and what you want to accomplish. But it's become a bit of a tradition here on the podcast to start with a pretty basic question, man, and that is the story of what brought John Stafford Stanley to libertarianism. So, what made you see that libertarianism is the way, and when did you decide that this small third party is the party for you?
Well, I actually, from 8th grade, I got into history real hard, loved history, and I thought I was a Republican at the time, and I didn't even know about libertarianism even though my uncle and my friends' dads, they were all libertarians. And so the more I got into history, I was like, yeah, I'm like this Thomas Jefferson guy. I'm like a Jeffersonian. And then it was during Gary Johnson era that I was like, these guys kind of think the same way that I do. And then once Joe Jorgensen come out, I was like, yeah, I think I'm a libertarian all the way. And which none of my beliefs have changed since the 8th grade.
Right. Yeah.
just the title.
That was always my thing, where I always considered myself an independent before formally joining the LP. I voted for Democrats, I voted for Republicans, I voted for Libertarians, I've voted for write-in candidates as jokes, right? I've kind of voted all of that, but at this point, I really think, as I see, at least at the national level, and even at the state and county level, I see so much damage being caused by both Republicans and Democrats that I'm like, all right, I'm going to formalize it and say, I'm going all in on this one. The Libertarian Party, of all the parties out there, they just have the best platform. So the question is now, how do we get from where we are now, 2% of the vote, to actually seeing libertarian governance? And honestly, man, what you're doing is the path. I've talked to quite a few people now, and it really starts local. So, I know a little bit about you from our chats, but what made you decide to run for the for Kernersville board, and why now, right? I'm curious, what made you kind of go from that leap from this is stuff I believe in to I'm going to go represent this and try to make this happen?
Yeah, well, truthfully, I've heard a lot from Republicans and Democrats that libertarians, they're the do nothing party, right? And I'm like, no, we have to do more than everybody else to even get on a ballot. And so I started looking at why is that? And the number one thing that I see is that we're not running locally. We don't have a L on local ballots. And Board of Aldermen, it's a nonpartisan race, but I'm making it pretty known that I'm a libertarian.
Right.
And I just felt like that it was time. It was time, and hopefully I can lead some more people to feel the same way, that it's time.
Man,
We need to stay local.
I got to respect that, man, because I was honestly thinking about running for mayor of my small town, right? And I looked into it, but then just with everything going on with like my business and being homeschooled, like I'm just like, I'm not ready to do that now. But it was something I kind of wanted to do for that same reason, right? Like, people like, well, libertarians, you're all theory. You've never done anything. And part of me is like, well, if you go into MLB and you never get an at bat, your batting average is 0, right? Like, we haven't had a shot to actually show the world that libertarian policies and libertarian governance will work. And when I think about that, and trying to envision a future, decades down the line where, we've got a libertarian president and a libertarian majority in both seats of Congress, like that's a beautiful goal. I wish that we could see it, because then everybody would realize, hey, these policies actually would work. But we're not going to get there unless we have more people like you and less like me, right? Like, I wanted to run for mayor. I think I could win mayor, right? I just didn't do the action. So, man, what was it like that lit the spark, man? Like, what was it that said enough is enough? I'm going to do this in my town.
I have no idea.
Okay.
To be truthfully honest, I have no idea. I've always wanted to,
right?
Because I see the concerns, I see the issues in our town and across the state, across the nation. I see all the issues, and I'm like, I've got some pretty good ideas, but I have no platform. I have no soapbox. So, really, it was the encouragement from everybody.
Okay.
Everybody was very encouraging, and I was like, all right, I'll do it.
Yeah, no, that's exciting, and that's what I think we need, right? Like, you've got at the national level and the mainstream media, painting libertarians as domestic terrorists, right? Which, and I've heard people, oh yeah, you guys are, you guys want to overthrow the government and all this stuff. I'm like, not really. Like, every libertarian believes in the non-aggression principle. Like, if there's anybody you like don't need to be worried about, it's probably the libertarian. Like, they're not just going to come over and like punch you in the face because they disagree with you. If they did that, they're not even a libertarian. So like, that's what I think it's going to take when I envision it. Like, whether it's just here in North Carolina, it is, small towns all across the country, like thousands of libertarians get elected. So when the national media is like, yeah, these libertarians, they're domestic terrorists, we have to root out this ideology, like, everyone in their small town is like, I got a libertarian running it. Like, my property taxes went down, things are being run better. Like, what do you mean he's a domestic terrorist? He's made my life better. She's made my life better. I feel like that's a solution. So, man, running a campaign, this is your first time deciding to run for office, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I figure this podcast can be great, right? I'm sure that, a goal of mine would be, and I know we missed the filing, so, no running in 2021 if anybody's inspired for this, but hey, 2022 is right around the corner. When you go about this, I'm sure that a lot goes into that decision, right? Like, what are some of the things that kind of made you want to do that? Or when you had that idea of, hey, I want to do this, what would be some good practices? Like, what have you done, and what would be useful to others who might want to run for office?
Just getting the ducks in the row. When I first started and decided, I had no idea. I was just dead in the water. And I actually got up with the local Forsyth County Libertarian Party, and they hooked me up with the treasurer. They hooked me up with everything else that I need. And really, I've been kind of letting other people take control over it. And anybody that's running for candidate needs that.
Yeah. A team. Yeah, absolutely.
There's so much. And my team always fusses at me that I try to do too much. which is just how I am. But I don't know, and I'm sure it's different in every city.
Right.
You know, different hoops you got to jump through and all that stuff. So building the team is the first priority, and I wish I would have built a team first, because I feel like I'm already behind.
Yeah.
Even though I think I'm kind of ahead in the campaign, but I feel like I'm behind in time.
Sure. Yeah, because there's so much to do. And, you know, I just noticed it there behind you, man. If not now, when? I think that's a fantastic sign there. And, you know, for anybody who's just listening to the audio, but that you know, you're living your sign, right? You know, if not now, when? You're out there doing it. So one of the things, you know, and this is where a lot of people, you know, I think when they think of local governance, you know, when I think of my town, right, you know, I think winning a position in my little town might be completely different from your little town or even somebody else's little town, and probably very different from a big town or a big city. You know, so I'm curious, you know, and I envision, you know, look, this is a statewide podcast, right? Like, and really, I guess it's an internet-wide podcast, but mostly people from North Carolina would be the ones listening to it. But I would hope, you know, maybe there's some people in Kernersville, right, who may not even be libertarians, right? But if you found this because, you know, you're doing some candidate research, John, I'd like to know, like, what are some of your goals when we think, you know, and sorry to everybody else who's not in Kernersville who's listening to this one, but this part of the podcast, I really want to know, John, like, what is it in Kernersville that really you want to go in? We fast forward, you know, you run a great campaign and get elected. What are your goals in joining the Kernersville board?
Well, my biggest goal is to basically just spread liberty, you know. Every town has a town that's got their foot on somebody else's neck or something like that. You know, there's always a small group of people that's running the lives of all the people that are in the city.
Sure.
So my biggest goal is to kind of loosen that up, to let the individual be free. And I mean, we can take care of ourselves better than somebody on some board can.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
So, and that's my goal, is to, for one, be a good representative to the people whose voices aren't heard. Because, you know, a lot of times the poor and minorities, their voices aren't heard within town government, unfortunately. So, and that's
a lot of them don't even get involved in voting. I was looking at it, like the mayor seat, my town, I think has like 3,500 people, and I think the mayor won with less than 200 votes. Like, which just tells you that, you know, who's voting. It's generally the wealthier people there, especially in, you know, in these elections that are, you know, not tied to a presidential or a national election, right? Like, you get great voter turnout on those. But when I started looking into the idea of running for mayor, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's how many people vote in these. And that really tells you, you know, I think, you know, if you're poor or middle class, you're not worried about like your local town council meeting or voting there. You're like worried about putting food on your table, right? Yeah. And like, and things like that. So, and unfortunately, right, like, whoever gets elected, it really doesn't matter who voted for them. If they won, they're going to represent whatever they want to represent, and chances are they're probably going to represent, you know, who voted for them. So I think it's great where you look at it and say, look, I want to represent everybody. You know? So you know, when you talk about kind of the things there, like, what are some of, and I understand, you know, some of the podcasts are just fun because they're just me and another libertarian chatting. You're an active candidate, right? So I don't want to, you know, put you into questions that, you know, that you may not want to answer. But, you know, when you look at it there, what are some like specific things that you look at? Because you said, you know, where it's not representing minorities and the poor in the area. Like, what are some examples of things there where you look at it and say, this is something that needs to be changed? Like, if you could just boil it down to like one thing that you look at there that say, hey, this is something that we could do to help represent all people equally with freedom and liberty?
I mean, from the libertarian standpoint, it's just to get the government out the way,
Right.
because we spend so much time just making ends meet just to pay taxes.
Sure.
And if we could get our taxes lowered and get more food on the table, then maybe more people would come out. Maybe more people would get involved. And then if more people get involved, then the crime will go down. Everything will go down because we're a community.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big point where, everyone's like, I see, I hate to jump to national, but, you see this thing like the Fight for 15, and I'm just like, yeah, everybody's fighting about raising this minimum wage. Does anybody realize, like, and I, because of what I do as a financial planner, like in real life, I look at things like these government programs, like even the ones that are well loved, like Social Security, you do the math on it and it's like the biggest scam ever. And if you could opt out of it, you'd be like almost an idiot not to. But, when you look at it, like taxation, everyone's fighting to raise wages, like, but even like regular people, right? Like you factor in like someone who doesn't even pay federal income tax, right? Like federal income tax, there's a large, actually, a very, very large portion of America that pays zero federal income tax. But that's not like all the taxes that people are thinking about. Like even if you don't pay federal income tax or state income tax, right? You're still looking at potentially property taxes, all types of, hidden taxes and alcohol taxes and sales taxes and all these things. Like there's no escaping that. And if you're, middle class and, in say like, the 24 to 25%, marginal federal bracket, like making more money is getting taxed. Like when you factor in all of those plus the gas taxes, property taxes, all this, like most people are probably paying close to 50%, like, middle class or more, like that's a really high tax rate. So you're talking about raising the minimum wage. Like how about just let people keep everything that they make, right? Like just completely, which I know, I'm talking Ancapistan, and I'm by no means representative of John's campaign. I just want to put that out there. There's libertarians who are variously degrees of radical, and I tend to be much more on the, the completely abolish taxation standpoint, which I know there's a lot of libertarians who don't agree with me on that, and I'm okay with that. We don't have to agree as long as we're fighting for liberty. But yeah, no, I think that's a big thing, and I saw it on your website, right? And I'm going to go ahead and pull it up real quick for everybody who's here listening to it. If you've got video, John Stafford Stanley or Stanley.com is where you want to go, and on here you'll be able to see a lot about the campaign, right? You've got the section where you can kind of meet and learn about John. I think the ones that I want to plug is donate. If you're a libertarian here, I think if we want libertarians to win, we are going up against two of the most well-funded, dirty political machines on planet Earth in the form of the Republican and Democrat parties. I think that we as libertarians will be far more efficient with every dollar spent on our campaigns than they could ever dream of being. But, if you do want to help John get elected, head over to the website. You can donate there to help that. And then, of course, it looks like you can also get involved. So if you're in the area, I know from talking to, to Spike Cohen and others who have done this, like, it's about getting out there and talking to people and knocking on doors. So I'm sure there's volunteer opportunities there. So, head on over to, johnstaffordstanley.com, donate, learn more, get involved, and we'll bring it back there. So, John, man, that when you think about it, I guess I'm trying to think on the podcast of like keeping it entertaining for libertarian, but I really want this to be a good opportunity for people who don't know about you. So, and we talked a little bit about your story, John. I guess for those who may know, you're a voter in Kernersville. Maybe you're a libertarian, maybe you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, completely apolitical. John, just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're right for this job.
Yeah, well, I was actually born and raised here in Kernersville, and then my family has been here for a very long time. So I've heard all the stories, I've heard the town gossip from everybody. So and we're a small community as well. So I grew up knowing everybody's face. You know, might not know their names, but I knew their faces. And I personally grew up on the other side of the tracks, as we call it, over in the middle class to poor area. And I know these people. You know, I know the people. I've met with the richest people in Kernersville, and I've met with the not so well off in Kernersville, and I get along with both of them perfectly.
Right.
You know, the funny thing is they both have the same goals as far as the community goes. They want to see the community do good and to be free and to have the pursuit of happiness, really.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I think everybody, we all want to thrive. We all want our neighbors to thrive, right? Like that. I think we have a lot more that unites all of us as humans in America than what divides us. But yeah, that's great. What are some of the common things that you hear from them, right? Like you talk about both of them wanting freedom, where we think about there. What are some of the common things that you kind of hear from both sides there as far as what they want out of their elected officials?
Well, a lot of it is with our elected officials. You know, there's a board of 5 and then a mayor and a town manager, and that controls 24,000 people in Kernersville. And when you have that small group controlling this stuff and nobody's going to the meetings, nobody's putting in their input, they all feel like their toes are getting stepped on. You know, and it doesn't matter your social class. Somehow your toes have got stepped on.
Right.
And well, I think that I could at least be a voice to stop people from getting their toes stepped on.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, just apply the libertarian ideology behind it, where if you're thinking of passing some kind of local ordinance or law and you look at it, you'll at least be able to look at it from a voice of reason of, no, that's going to harm these people, or no, that's going to, that's going to impact these people's property rights or something along the lines there. So, I mean, that'd be a great, and I wish there was at least one libertarian voice on every single governing body everywhere, because at least there'd be somebody there to say the truth, right? Whether we want to hear it or not, the truth is the right thing to do there. So from that standpoint, you mentioned that you've talked to kind of everybody there, and you saw kind of general frustration with both Republicans and Democrats, which I think we see a lot of there. What are some of the things that are, at the local level there that, and I know you mentioned that the board is nonpartisan, right? Which
yeah.
I part of me likes the idea of it being nonpartisan, and that, someone's not just voting for the letter in parentheses after the name, right? Like they're actually voting on the person there. But let's be honest. If you have a far, a very, very conservative Republican or a very, very liberal Democrat in a nonpartisan position, it's not really usually very hard to find out who your nonpartisan person is and how they align politically. What are some things there that people are kind of fed up with both Republicans and Democrats about?
Well, one of the things is obviously high taxes and infrastructure.
Okay.
We have, I'm not going to say horrible planning, but it's just about right there at the horrible line. For example, we just got in on our main street. We have a whole new section that's been built, and they put in a new big burger spot. And no matter which direction you come from, you have to make a U-turn to get into that big burger spot. And that's just a waste. They tried to go too far and too beyond, and I personally think a lot of it was just we got our buddies to come in plan this stuff out, and we got their buddies to come and pave it. But that's one of the big issues is our infrastructure and planning.
And dude, you're almost like triggering like an internal hatred of my own little town here, just because my neighborhood, like you come out my neighborhood and there's like a main road, right? And like you either want to go left or right. I can't make a left out of my neighborhood, and like I have to go left 50% of the time, so I got to make a right, go up, make a U-turn, and it's so frustrating. And and there's like 170 houses in my neighborhood, so like we should be enough people like. And maybe that's on me. Maybe I just need to rally my dang neighborhood and have have 30 of us show up at one of these town meetings and be like, give us a left turn. This is NASCAR country. We need left turns. So no, yeah, that's a great point there. And from that standpoint, I look at it from the standpoint of, obviously if no matter how you get into it, you're having to kind of make U-turns, right? Like there's got to be a way to just make it so you can turn in there. What's the hurdle there? Like if it's causing congestion there, is it that city management doesn't want to do anything about it? Is it like because I feel like if something's bogging down a whole small town there, it shouldn't be, like you get enough people complaining about it, I would think they'd almost want to do it. But what do you think is kind of driving that one as far as holding up? Fixing that?
Well, the problem with it is that was their solution to another problem.
Okay.
And that just come in within the past 5 years. So to come back and redo the whole roads, that's going to take a whole new tax increase.
Right.
And there's so many things here in Kernersville that are just like that, where it's like almost as if they're setting themselves up for failure just to have that extra income when the time nears.
Right.
It's a continual profitable machine.
It is. And with that, from that standpoint, and I know every town's different, right? Like I think of my little town, and there's some broader libertarian ideas, right, that we generally, for the most part, and again, there's a lot of diversity of thought within libertarianism, but in general, the idea of like the over police state, right, is that something that and for me, that's one of my big problems is I see a whole lot of small towns that basically the idea of police being to protect and serve, when you think of it there, and especially if I put myself in like the mind of Republicans and Democrats who are a little less anti-state than I am, but the idea of to protect and serve. But I see so many small towns like in North Carolina and probably every other state in the country where like local police are really more of a revenue generating source than anything else. And I can only speak for my area. I don't live in Kernersville. I don't know if is that something that is relevant in Kernersville, or talk to me, I guess, about that process.
Yeah. Well, Kernersville is unique because we have 3 times the national ratio for officers to population.
Wow. Okay.
So we have an abundance of officers.
Okay.
And we have fairly low crime.
Okay.
Which many people will say is because we have so many officers.
Sure.
And there might be some truth to that, but you always see it beginning of month, end of month. It's almost as if they're on their mission, to generate that revenue because the DMV stickers just ran out, so let's go get the DMV sticker guys. And you see it more on one side of the town than you do the other, for financial reasons.
Right.
But we can definitely work at it. And our local law enforcement officers, most of them are great. I've had plenty of conversations with them, and they're like, we're here to protect the Constitution. And I'm like, right on, man. I don't think your town is, but I'm glad you are.
Yeah, that's always been my problem there is, I know a lot of good cops, and some libertarians will attack me for saying that one in and of itself, but I mean, I know them as human beings. The cop just happens to be their job, right? My problem is ideologically with the laws, not necessarily with the cops, right? Where that whole idea of when you give somebody a ticket or a citation because their registration is like 2 days old because it's 2 days into the month or something like that. Like, are you protecting? Are you serving? I don't see how that falls into either of those two categories. Like, and at that point, you're essentially shaking down people who are already shaken down by the government in so many other ways. Is that something that when you're out there talking to people, like, I guess kind of what's the feel there, right? Like, because everybody has varying degrees of like their viewpoint on victimless crime, right? Because that's my big thing, and I'm probably more radical than most people, but I think if there's no victim, there shouldn't be a crime. Personal level, and I know it's difficult, and you got a lot of minds to change there. But what's kind of the general sense in Kernersville from people you've been talking to?
Really, the general sense, it depends on who you ask.
Right.
Because if you go to one side of the town, the answer is completely different. If you go to the other side of town, it's blow you out the water with their answer.
Right.
So, but the general consensus is no victim, no crime. I mean, once you start getting to talk to people and you're like, well, do you think that they should be in trouble? And you're like, well, a little bit of trouble, not a lot of trouble. They only did a little crime.
Right.
And that's totally different from if you have a lot of money. If you don't have a lot of money, that little bit of crime, it's a big payment out.
Yeah, it's a much bigger difference. I mean, there's people sitting in jail because they can't afford bail, right? Like for a victimless crime, for a victimless crime, and what I think a lot of people don't realize there, and that's where to the rich it's almost like not a problem, like, right? Oh, if I do something that's stupid, I get a fine. Oh, $100, $200, throw it out there. Or if oh, you got me for speeding and I was going a little too fast, so you actually put me in jail. It's not hard for you to bail out if you're rich, right? Where if you're not, now you're talking, well, I can't pay the bail, so do I sit here? Well, now I'm sitting here. Now I lost my job because I didn't get to show up to my job, and that's the thing that that I talk to a lot of people who like maybe just don't quite get it, right? Where even in that situation, and what I found helps them get it is like, look, your tax dollars pay for this person to go through the whole process, like the public defender, the judge that has to oversee it, the bailiff that's in the courtroom, the per diem that's paid to the jury. Like, you're paying for all of that, and if there's no victim, like, does that really seem like it's the best place to spend your money? Or, hey, maybe we can do something about this road here that's causing massive traffic jams for everybody with the money we save from not prosecuting victimless crimes. Like, those are the things that, and you're right, where it depends who you ask in the extreme, but I found that like most people, regardless of where they are, there's a libertarian argument to be made. You just have to find out which one it is, right? Like what they really care about.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so when I was looking through your candidate there as well, you talk about better allocation of tax funds, right? Where that's one of your goals that you've got that out there on the public website. What are some of the things that you think Kernersville is spending money on either where it shouldn't, or not spending money where it should? I know we're getting super local with this one, but I really want, Kernersville voters, if nobody listens to this but people in Kernersville, and Kernersville can get some good information out of them, I'm considering this podcast a win. But, you talk about lowering taxes and better allocation of tax funds. What are some of the ways that you would like to see those funds reallocated?
Well, Kernersville, we spend a whole bunch of money to try to bring in big businesses. And here recently, a lot of that money has worked out for Kernersville. We've got in a FedEx, we got an Amazon, but in the past, we've had some very, very hard fails where we're probably spending maybe close to $50,000 or more just on proposals to these big companies. When there's 12 business owners on downtown that's ready to take their business to a state level or even a national level, and all they need is $10,000. They just need a little help out.
Right.
And I would rather have that money be poured back into a local community or local group and for us to focus on our own people than spending that money out somewhere else and just hoping it comes back one day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think investing locally, you know, again, I'm in that, you know, no tax standpoint. So in my world, I guess nobody gets investment from the state. But I think with all that extra money that everybody'd be saving, they'd get, you know, a lot of local investment from their neighbors. You know, but when I think about that, you know, you mentioned also lower taxes, right? Like there's nothing you can do about federal. There's nothing you can do about state. What particularly, and I know every town is different, right? Like this town could have like an extra penny sales tax, or this one slightly higher property tax rate. What are some of the taxes that you'd like to see lowered in Kernersville?
The main thing is property tax. If we can get the property taxes lowered, that will help out the entire community, from the renters to the owners to the business owners to even the construction workers or the contractors that are building the new homes, because we have a huge influx of people coming in all the time, and the property taxes are so high right now that it's almost, you can't buy a piece of property and start building on it. It's got to be a huge development to come in to even be able to afford that.
Just on the raw land, even?
Yeah, just on the raw land.
Wow.
I mean, we have pretty high property tax because we're also paying Winston-Salem for our water and stuff.
Okay.
So that's got to get put into it. We don't do our own water. So there's a bunch of money going out, and it's not really reflecting back into the town.
And how far, you know, how, you know, I again, I'd say do away with all taxes, but that's not really practical, and especially, you know, not for there. What kind of margin do you see there? Like, you know, how much would you realistically think Kernersville could lower its property taxes on that front, right?
Yeah, well, right now the average homeowner is probably spending about $1,500 in property taxes a year.
Okay.
And that's on the home. That's not including the car, you know, and everything else in between.
Yeah.
But if we even got that lowered to where they were only paying $800 to $900 a year instead of $1,500, so almost cutting that in half, that's way more money that'll be able to go into downtown, you know, to all the shops downtown, because people will go out and spend that money, as we've seen, you know.
Yeah, they you know, that's the thing, you know, I sure saw when the stimulus payments hit, especially when they went to people who really didn't need it. There sure was a lot of people just going out spending, and the reality is if people have more money in their pocket and they want something, it's a lot easier to make a discretionary purchase. You know, when you feel like you've got some safety there. So yeah, I want to talk about a couple more of your goals here. As far as solutions for the future, you've got that in there as one of your campaign goals and something you'd like to accomplish. Talk to me about your solutions for the future, man. What does the future of Kernersville look like?
Well, I see the solution of the future. I would rather have everything more voluntary. Starting more programs like the Rotary Club, which we have, but not a lot of people are involved. So I want to see a just more voluntary basis for everything, getting people involved with the town. Because if we can do that, I mean, we could change everything about this town, and it won't be my goals that are being changed. It'll be the individuals, because when it comes down at the end of the day, it's not what I think is best. It's what you think is best for yourself.
Right. Yeah, and that's something that I think, the message of liberty to me is really empowering, right? Like it really is empowering. And what I found is a lot of people, I kind of get angry at Republicans because I feel like they campaign like libertarians and then govern like Democrats. Because they like to talk the talk that they're about liberty. But at the same time they'll ram through things that are really, pretty objectively violating, liberty, right? Like, I think back to, and Republicans are going to get mad at me on this one, but when you bring up Donald Trump, where like he's like, take the guns first and then give due process. I'm like, whoa, you're supposed to, you're claiming that you're about liberty. There's nothing liberty about take the guns and then go through. That is antithetical to liberty. That is as authoritarian as you can get. And I think a lot of people don't even understand what that like concept of liberty is, right? Like I find some people who are, just diehard Democrats where they hear that idea of liberty, and because because Republicans campaign like libertarians and try to talk about liberty, they're just like, oh, liberty's bad. That's a Republican thing. No, it's not. But I found that a lot of people like, just getting out there and figuring out like what really matters to you. And if you can find out what really matters to people and explain how liberty is actually the better solution for that, right? Like I talk to people where, I made a decision like as a homeschool, like to homeschool my son for 4th grade, right? And I did it before COVID hit. Like it was just, hey, we want to travel, we want to do things on the road, homeschool makes sense. Then COVID hit and I'm like, oh, everybody's homeschooling now. But after this, I'm actually going to like keep it going because I look at it from the standpoint of, at this point with technology where it is, I can spend 3 hours a day, right? Carve 3 hours out of my work day, and I can give my kid a better education he'll get at a public school, and I send him to a private school. I feel like in 3 hours a day with me being hands-on, I can give him a better education than the private school I was paying to send them to. And I think that that's something that a lot of communities, right, where especially where you described, you kind of have the rich area and the poor area, and it just generally seems that the richer areas, and this is one of my problems with the state, is the rich areas generally have pretty good schools. The poor areas generally have pretty bad schools. And the government solution is always, well, let's just throw a bunch of money at the poor schools. And it doesn't work. Everywhere across the country has tried this. Like, it doesn't work. But I think that, you've said a couple of things, like promoting that idea of like, being a volunteer in your community, volunteerism, rolling that back. And I think that that's one of the things that if you could find people who are like, my kid's in a bad school and it sucks and it's the only one there. If you can bring those solutions of like, yeah, but it's 2021 nowadays, there's like free on-school, homeschool things that like, I do it like 3 hours hands-on, but I know I've talked to other homeschool parents who are like, yeah, it's like 2 hours a day. That's all, like, that's the only commitment from parents. And they're like, wait, so I can spend 2 hours a day and then use other resources and my kid gets, and whether for whatever reason you want to pull it out of public schools. And that's one of the things that I think, when people say, abolish, there's some people who are like abolish public education. And I'm like, yeah, I'd be okay with that. Right. But I don't think that it's very practical to just be like, all right, cut it all off and like all these. But I think a viable solution is if we can, whether it's through local governments or outreach, whatever, is teach people the tools that will enable them to do this. And if you have a bunch of people who are kind of doing things like either homeschools or non-traditional community schools, right? Like someone was doing the math on this where it's like, if a teacher were to like just start their own school of like 10 people in their very local community, right? And like did away with the public school, and like each one of them just paid like a small, like you teachers could probably get paid way more just by doing something like that. And I feel like, you know, I just know my kid's happier. He's still got just a great education from all the standardized testings that I had to do. And I was nervous about that stuff. And now I'm like, you know, I think this is a solution, and I'd love to see more communities embrace that. And then the long-term effect of that is if everybody is doing these community or charity or home schools, and enrollment in local school districts is so far down, you know, that you look at that, like, you know, if everybody in Kernersville, homeschooled, for example, and there was no need for a public education budget, think of all of the other problems that can be fixed in Kernersville, right? Like that road, if it makes so many people in the town mad, you could fix that right away if you didn't have to support all of these other things. So I think that's a great thing. So when you talk about kind of spreading liberty, right? Like where you come in, everyone, you know, it's a nonpartisan election, but you're making it very well known that you are a libertarian and want to spread libertarian ideas there, which I love. What are some of the key things? Like if you could get, you know, 3 messages across to the people of Kernersville that, you know, you get elected, these are, you know, you're going to be spreading liberty here. What are the things that you'd love to spread and like just drop into their minds if you could?
Really, the main thing is that they are welcome in town government. Yeah. You know, that's the biggest thing that I want to drop into people's mind is that we are all welcome in the town government. And the only way we can actually get to the point where we are free from all the, I'm not going to use bad words, but
I'll say bullshit for you because you're the politician and I'm just the random guy hosting the podcast. But yeah.
Yeah, but when we can get away from all this, we get that from ourselves. So getting more people involved, that's my number one goal. That's about it.
Yeah, really. No, that's a fantastic.
More than I do.
Yeah, no, I'm excited, and I think that's a good one, right? Like, you know, you see a few problems, but the big one being, you know, not everyone's represented. But if you can get out there and involve everyone in their local government, that allows you to be a better board member, right? Because now you've got more voices in the room to really figure out, you know, because if nobody shows up, you're really just guessing, right? Like unless you went out and knocked on the 25,000 doors in Kernersville and talked to everybody, you know, if they're not showing up and getting involved, there's no way for any government to really listen. And I think that's one of the things where you see so much coalescing around national politics, but you don't see that much of like local communities like getting involved. And I think that would be a wonderful beacon, you know, to do, right? To show, hey, look, we want to involve everybody. Everyone's welcome. Come get involved, and then hold our elected representatives accountable, right? There's that's the other big one is, you know, I feel like a lot, you know, a while back I talked to Jonathan Riggs, and he is the chair of the Pitt County LP. And he was sharing just the shady stuff that their local government was doing, and like nobody was there to call him. And it was as simple as like he started going there and calling them on it, and when they weren't listening, went to the news, and then the town got behind that. And to me, like, you know, you're going a different approach. Like you don't need to necessarily go in and call out corruption here. You're going to go in and be like, hey, we're running this thing. Come in. We want you involved. We care about your opinion. We want to make this town better for all of you. And I think that's really inspiring. And I wish you luck in there. So I've got kind of a closing question, or actually before I go to my final question, always, is there anything else that you want to get across to Kernersville voters or to just the broader North Carolina libertarians listening?
Really, that I appreciate everybody's support, everybody across the whole state, because evidently I'm one of very few libertarians that are running in North Carolina right now. So I'm overwhelmed with support, and I want to thank everybody who has been helping me. And I still need more support though. I still need so much more support. We have 11 people running this year, which is a record for most anybody that's been alive in Kernersville or that is alive today.
Wow.
We haven't had 11 people run in our lifetime.
Wow.
Last year, only one person ran, and he decided he was going to run like the month of. So in October, he was like, yeah, write my name in. And then everybody else. No, he didn't.
No, he didn't. He didn't.
He got 400 votes though.
Wow.
So that's very impressive.
Yeah.
But this year we have 11 people running, and I'm the youngest. Everybody else is a little bit older, so I need a whole lot of support. And I definitely need some donations so we can make some things happen. Because
and libertarian door knockers, I'm sure, and all of that. If you want to knock on doors, again, head to johnstaffordstanley.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put a link in the description to the website. So, yeah, no, I am with you, man. And if I find myself up there when it gets closer, I'd love to come knock on doors with you. And I'd make a donation live on here, but I don't want to show my credit card information. But you'll see a donation coming from me right when we wrap up the podcast, man, to kick that off. So with that, I'm going to throw to my closing question that I have stumbled into asking every guest of the podcast so far. So I know that in general, we are libertarians. We want government to leave us alone. We want liberty. We don't like authoritarianism, but I want you to forget about that for a brief moment and go grab your all-powerful monarch crown, put it on your head, and you are monarch for one decree. You have the ability to do any one thing as a totalitarian dictator, either create something new, get rid of something that exists. What would it be and why?
It would be all the regulations on energy, on our energy grid. And why is because we have the resources and the technology for every household to supply their own energy sources. And if you can supply your own energy, you can make your own food, you can clean your own water. You really don't have to rely on anybody. You technically wouldn't even need money after you got set up.
Yeah.
So you would only work for your want. And that would be the number one things that I would change.
Completely, all energy related regulations. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on the on the podcast. I hope to have you on here for a victory episode, and we can talk about that one there, or maybe a little closer to the election as well. Thanks so much for coming on the show, and to all the listeners, thanks so much. This is always fun for a weekly show. Thank you so much. We will see you next week. Get out there, spread liberty.